Running back has been the bane of my existence. This has been so hard all season to figure out what running backs will have the roles, what running backs will succeed with said roles. And the rule of thumb that I'm going to be applying going forward is I am going to be betting on talented players. At the very top, this isn't really going to change anything. We're going to go CMC 1. Duh. They're going up against the Cardinals. They'll be able to run the ball over and over and over again. We all know Christian McCaffrey's in a tier by himself. Dropping down to tier 2, we will have Austin Eckler here. Now, expectations are that Eckler plays this week. Now, all I know is if Eckler misses, you know how many Los Angeles Chargers running backs we look to start? Zero. Nobody's interested. For the love of God, do not start Joshua Kelly. May or may not have learned that the hard way. Now, number 3 will be Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard, tough matchup going up against the New England Patriots, where you have him as a favorite in the game, but the Dallas Cowboys have an implied team total of 24.5 points. Nonetheless, Pollard has been getting a considerable amount of volume. Obviously, a running back that not only is getting the goal line role this year, but as well as the targets out of the backfield. Pollard, one of the very few running backs that we can confidently rely on his volume, his talent, and the offense that he's playing in. Now, dropping down to the next tier, I want to put Bijan Robinson in the same tier as Eckler and Tony Pollard. This past week, you had Bijan Robinson with a whopping 33 rushing yards. Thank you, Bijan. I'm so happy we drafted you everywhere. But nonetheless, not really his fault. I mean, he was still going out there. He looked incredible on a per touch perspective. More so an issue of the Atlanta Falcons' overall offense. The offense isn't going to magically turn around all of a sudden. There's still going to be a below average team that looks to run the ball over and over again. But you do have an applied team total of 20 points going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, our next running back will be Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker going up against the Giants. We'll throw Saquon Barkley here as well. This will be one of the higher scoring games of the week. If you look at Las Vegas over-unders, very similar to what we said about the Chargers and the Vikings game last week. You wanted to start as many players in that game as you possibly could. I think it will be a similar situation for the Giants and Seahawks. Now, keep in mind with that, I mean, Saquon Barkley is one of the very few Giants that you can actually start. Now, they are saying that he's dealing with a high ankle sprain. They are saying that he's going to play. I'm recording this Monday night. Please just make sure you're subscribed. I'll be updating you with injuries every single day, all the way until Sunday. But you know what? Honestly, even if he does play, I guess we probably should be a little bit more hesitant based off the ankle sprain. So we will move him behind our next two guys. First one being Travis Etienne. With Etienne going up against Atlanta, I mean, Travis Etienne remains to be one of the very few running backs that you can confidently rely on. The volume, the talent, and I want to say the offense. Now, the offense hasn't been great. Trevor Lawrence has disappointed over the past few weeks. I want to believe that Trevor Lawrence will turn things around. I want to believe that Lawrence is still a real good NFL quarterback, but I don't know. The way things are trending, we have to be a little bit more concerned about this Jacksonville Jaguars offense than we previously did. Now, our next guy will be Josh Jacobs, and Jacobs has been horrendous. I know everybody is panicking about Josh Jacobs, and people are going to be screaming at me that we have Josh Jacobs ranked this high because he's been very bad. But what I want to be looking at is this Los Angeles Chargers defense. This defense gave up 36 points to the Dolphins week 1, which honestly may be one of the better defensive performances against the Dolphins this year. But week 2, they give up 27 points to the Titans. Week 3, they give up 24 to the Vikings. And if you look at their running back production here, I mean, this past week, this Chargers defense actually made Alexander Mattison look pretty damn good. Josh Jacobs is still a running back that fundamentally is getting every single touch in this backfield. It's more so an issue of the offensive line. It's more so an issue of the offense overall. But I mean, if you are looking at the implied team total that we have here for the Raiders, I'm going to have to double check to make sure that this is true. I mean, I know that the defense is pretty damn bad in what you have in Los Angeles. But yeah, you actually have the Chargers favored by about 5.5 points in this game. If we're going to be looking at the over-under, I mean, this game currently is sitting at 47.5. So this is actually supposed to be the second highest scoring game of the week this week, only behind the Seattle Seahawks and New York Giants. So go ahead, fire up Josh Jacobs, ladies and gentlemen. And then at 8, like we said, we'll have Saquon Barkley. I would rank him a little bit higher, but coming off the ankle sprain, we probably should even be lower than this, to be honest. Now, going down to our next tier, I'm going to give Derrick Henry another week before we move him down further in these rankings. Now, I just busted my butt overhauling all of our rest of season fantasy football rankings on flockfantasy.com. And you'll see that, yes, I did move Derrick Henry down to being a low-end RB1 in those rest of season rankings. This is for a full BBR format. Now, going up against the Bengals defense, this Bengals defense is pretty good. I mean, right now I'm watching the Bengals play the Rams. If you see my eyes wander, I mean, we're in the third quarter and they've shut out Kyron Williams, the running back we'll talk about later on. And with Henry, very interested to see if we have the Titans actually being able to compete in this game. Because if they get blown out, then what happens is we see more Tajay Spears than Henry, which obviously is frustrating. But the way the Bengals are playing right now, I think this should be a closer game in week 4. But of course, if you want to check out our rest of season fantasy football rankings, we just updated all of those over on flockfantasy.com. That's also where you can find all my premium content, all the premium content of your favorite fantasy football creators. And if you sign up to flockfantasy.com with promo code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription. And yours truly will break down your team in a fantasy football podcast with promo code FLOCK and that mother flocker tier. But let's move over to our next guy. We will have Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones practiced last week. I honestly thought he was playing in week 3. But what have we learned through the past 2 weeks, ladies and gentlemen? If Aaron Jones were to miss, you do not play A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon's a bum. Let's move over to Zach Moss, who is actually pretty damn good. Moss, 2 weeks ago, every single snap, every single touch in this Indianapolis backfield. Now, he did split this somewhat this past week, but ultimately at the end of the day, this is still a running back that had 30 carries. So even if he split, it's more so just the workload was insane and he needed a little time off. Now, our next running back will be James Cook. James Cook, this will be the highest scoring game of the week. Going up against the Miami Dolphins, the over-under of this game is 53.5 points. We want as many pieces in this game as we can possibly get. What's actually surprising is you have the Buffalo Bills as 2.5 to 3 point favorites, depending on the sports book that you are looking at. So yeah, we got to go through. We have to take James Cook, even if it's frustrating based off his lack of usage at the goal line. Now, our next running back will be Joe Mixon. With Mixon, this Bengals game has not finished. He hasn't really done anything so far, but he's still getting the usage. He's still getting the role. Really hope this Bengals offense picks this up in the second half. Obviously, if we get any news with Joe Burrow, I'll be updating these rankings as the week goes on. Now, Raheem Mostert will be our next running back at 14. This was the running back that's had the volume over the past 2 weeks, but it is going to be so damn difficult to rank the combination of Raheem Mostert as well as Devon Achane this week. Please go to the comment section and let me know what you think. Like we said, this is supposed to be a very high scoring game. We want as many pieces in here as possible. But I do think that this is a 50-50 backfield split where even in a 50-50 backfield split, based off how efficient these running backs have been, not only how efficient these running backs have been, but how good this offense has been overall, you still want to start these guys. And now Kyron Williams will be our next RB at 15 going up against the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, they will be favored in this game. And Kyron Williams getting every single touch, getting every single snap out of this backfield, also getting involved as a pass catcher, which you love to see. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I want to look at our guy. I want to look at Alvin Kamara. Really hoping Kamara comes out here and has a big season. We drafted him a lot in best ball whenever the suspension risk were at an all-time high. And this is a running back that everything has gone right for him over the past few months. First, you're only suspended 3 weeks. Then Condre Miller, hamstring strain. Miller doesn't really get any training camp time, no preseason time, no beginning of the season time. Miller doesn't look really that good in week 3. Then Jamal Williams hits the IR right before your return. So everything is setting up. The stars are aligning for Alvin Kamara to have a big game. Now, what's going to be very interesting is the New Orleans Saints go up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this weekend, and you will have Jameis Winston as the starter against this Bucs team. So regardless of if Jameis Winston will be good or not, we've learned time and time again that Jameis Winston will most likely put up fantasy points for his pass catchers just because he's going to air it out, and hell, there may be turnovers and they may have to push the pace of play in the second half. Now, our next running back will be Brian Robinson. Really tough matchup going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Feel bad for Robinson. I want to rank him a lot higher than this. I mean, hell, he's been a top 10 running back through the first 3 weeks. Just fundamentally, when you have that horrible matchup against the Bills last weekend, and then you get the Philadelphia Eagles this weekend who just completely shut out Rachaad White, It's hard to be too in on Robinson at this point. And then Ramondre Stevenson also in a spot where super tough matchup. I mean, Ramondre Stevenson and the New England Patriots have an implied team total right now of 17.5 points. So it's almost the exact opposite of what you have in Buffalo, the exact opposite of what you have in Miami, where in Miami and Buffalo, we want to start as many of those guys as we possibly can. Here, if you're going to be looking at what you're going to get with the New England Patriots, probably want to be avoiding all these names, but Ramondre Stevenson, of course. Now, DeAndre Swift will be our next RB at 18. If you look at the usage in this Monday night game, I understand that it does look like it's a somewhat split between Kenneth Walker and DeAndre Swift. In reality, Swift with this guy, Swift had pretty much every single touch in the first half. I mean, it was more so, they blew out the Bucs. The Bucs couldn't move the ball down the field. Give at least a little bit here to Kenneth Gainwell. Not worried about Gainwell going forward. It's a great offense. With that being said, of course, Jalen Hurts will take rushing touchdowns. Now, Rachaad White will be our next running back at 19. I understand horrible week this past week from not only White, but for the entire Bucs offense. I don't think anybody thinks the Bucs are going to be some great team this next year. But what I do think that you're expecting is that at least you have some weeks where they're able to effectively move the ball down the field. Rachaad White is getting every single target out of this backfield. Rachaad White is pretty much getting every single snap at the same time. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs will be our next running back at 20. And to be honest with you, I'm not ranking him this low. No, we're moving Jahmyr Gibbs up. I'm sorry about it. We are going to be moving Jahmyr Gibbs up for a full PPR format to the very top of this tier under the assumption that you have no David Montgomery. Now, of course, with that being said, if David Montgomery were to play, then all of a sudden, maybe we need to go through and maybe we need to reevaluate this ranking. But this is a running back that still actually had a ton of carries, which is surprising. He didn't have that large of a role for Craig Reynolds this past week. And the Lions weren't really competitive this past week. This was a game that they were able to just easily go out there and win. They're able to run the ball over and over and over again. You kind of want them in an environment where they're going to have to throw in the second half if you're a Jahmyr Gibbs owner. And it could be a more competitive game against the Green Bay Packers on Thursday night, where right now the Lions are only favored by 1 to 1.5 points in this game. Now, our next running back will be James Conner. Conner dominating so far. James Conner looks great. Now, with that being said, this is a situation in which you have the toughest matchup in the NFL. You're going up against the 49ers. Yes, Conner did well against the Dallas Cowboys defense this past week. But if you're looking at Las Vegas sportsbooks, they currently have the Arizona Cardinals with an implied team total of 15 points, which is the lowest scoring offense in the NFL this week. And so if you're projected to be the lowest scoring offense in the NFL because, one, you're the Cardinals, and two, you're going up against the toughest defense in the NFL, we probably naturally need to be a little bit lower on you. Now, our next two running backs, Devon Achane and Jerome Ford, honestly, you can move them up these rankings. I would love to know your opinion on these guys as well. I know the majority of y'all watching this video are significantly smarter and better at fantasy football than I am. But if you are looking at this with Devon Achane, you dropped 50 points last week. 50. How the hell are we not going to have him as a top 12 running back? It's just so damn hard when ultimately this projects to be a 60-40 split. Where we saw a little bit more Raheem Mostert as a receiver last week. Devon Achane looks so good on a per touch perspective, but this is arguably one of the toughest rush defenses in the NFL. They have shut down literally every single running back that they've gone against. So I know it seems like maybe we're a little bit lower on Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert than you'd want to be, but we do have them ultimately both ranked as top 24 running backs in one of the toughest matchups you could ever play in. Now, in the case of Jerome Ford, I understand everybody's super pumped if you started Jerome Ford last week, and you should be, right? You had a ton of fantasy points. You got 2 touchdowns. That's awesome. Now, with that being said, ultimately, Kareem Hunt was on a snap count. With that being said, Jerome Ford had 10 carries for 18 rushing yards. So while Jerome Ford is definitely projecting to lead this backfield here, I don't necessarily know how excited we can get here saying, oh, okay, yeah. No, he's the locked and loaded starter every single week. Let's go through and let's just lock him in. I would really like to see what the usage looks like one more week where Kareem Hunt had been on an NFL roster for more than 4 days. Now, our next running back will be Alexander Mattison. Alexander Mattison, superb last week. He's in an elite offense. You're going up against the Carolina Panthers. You're projected to drop 24.75 points, a similar mark to what you have with the Miami Dolphins this week. But the issue is Cam Akers wasn't active last week, similar to what we're looking at with Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt. I'm going to be a little more interested to track the usage of these two backs. I want to see what the split is between Alexander Madison and Cam Akers in week 4. If Madison continues to get pretty much every single touch, then sure, we can go out there and we can start him again. It's just way too early to assume that'll be the case. Now, our next 2 running backs going up against the Houston Texans. Pretty good matchup, but pretty bad offense. You have Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. And this will be the first time that I go through throwing the towel. And for you Jaylen Warren truthers, I will put him ahead of Najee, where this past week is the first week where you've seen him go out there and actually have 50% of this backfield. And with the workload he's had so far this season, he has outproduced Najee Harris. And ultimately, the most concerning part of Najee is going to be the fact that this is a running back that's had legitimately 0 involvement as a receiver so far this season. Like, I mean, if y'all go back a couple years, you had Najee Harris in a game where he had 19 targets. The man's had like 2 receiving yards so far this season. Now, Javonte Williams will be our next RB. The Denver Broncos just look horrendous. I was expecting that maybe Denver eventually turns things around. I was expecting that maybe, who knows, the Denver Broncos are able to go out there and they're able to do something. But, I mean, it's just been bad. I don't know. Javonte, P. Ryan, you can't really take a lot from their usage this past week, considering the fact they just lost the game 20-70. So it's really hard to project out these running backs. They are actually favored against the Chicago Bears by 3.5 points this week. Now, our next guy will be Isaiah Pacheco at 30. With Pacheco, yeah, he's in the best offense in the NFL. He's the starting running back in the best offense in the NFL. Ultimately, it's a team that typically doesn't look to go through and run the ball. And at the same time, if you're going to look at this is a situation where they're splitting it 3 different ways. You had touchdowns for Pacheco, for McKinnon, for Clyde Edwards-Helaire this past week. And if that's what we need, if we need 5 total running back touchdowns or 4 total running back touchdowns for these guys to be viable, really hard to rely on them in anything but best ball. Now, Khalil Herbert will be our next running back. Actually, maybe a decent spot for Khalil Herbert, where you're going up against a Denver Broncos defense that is no bueno. I mean, this Broncos defense just let up a zillion touchdowns to the Miami Dolphin running backs. Now, of course, there's a big difference between the offense in Chicago and the offense in Miami, where, as we already mentioned, you actually had the Broncos as 3.5 point favorites in this game. Now, we are going to throw Roschon here as well. Roschon, Khalil Herbert, they're kind of split in the backfield. I think Roschon will continue to expand his role. Really like what we've seen. It's just hard to rely on anybody in this offense. And then we will throw Tyler Algier here in 33. If you're playing in a non-PPR format, I think you can rank Tyler Algier a little higher than this. But the issue is you just don't know right now. I mean, as it stands right now with Tyler Algier, he has no usage in the receiving game. This offense scored 6 points this past week. So I'm more so just continue to view him as the elite handcuff running back. If anything were to occur to Bijan Robinson, then you slide Tyler Algier up to being a top 10 running back. Now, I want to reiterate, non-PPR format, Bijan is going to fall down these rankings and Algier will rise up. These are going to be rankings for a full PPR league where we are really valuing the role that Bijan Robinson has as a receiver in this offense. But I do want to at least mention the Baltimore backfield for a second. Maybe one of these guys turns out to be startable. I don't know the availability of Gus Edwards. I don't know the availability of Justice Hill. I don't know what this team's doing. Very hard to rank the Baltimore Ravens running backs this early on in the process. I will continuously update y'all in live streams every single night. So just make sure you are subscribed to the channel and you will see those updates. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for checking this out. If you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And of course, if you want to check out all my rest of season rankings, all my premium content, all the premium content from your favorite fantasy football creators, you're going to find all of that on flockfantasy.com. Promo code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription. And on top of that, with the Mother Flocker tier, yours truly will go through and break down your fantasy football team in a podcast. But I think that's all I have for you. Thank you again. Really do appreciate you and really hope that we get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.